All right, so I'm open for questions. So in order to do this in sort of an orderly, somewhat orderly fashion, if you would use your raise your hand option, then that will pop you up to the front of the queue for me to see you, and then have you turn on your microphone and ask a question. Better for me to do it that way than to try to keep track of the questions that might be in the chat room. I know, Anne, you had one. Was that you, Anne, that had one about retrogrades?
That was me, yes. Just
Oh, that's Anne Marie. Sorry,
yes.
two Annes, one Anne Marie. So what is it about retrogrades that you need to have explained?
Well, when I sent you my chart, you said, or my math, you said that when there's retrograde, instead of applying, they're separating. So is that?
It could be either way. It could be if it's applying, if you think it's applying, it could be separating. If it looks like it's separating, it could be applying. They switch places. So they switch directions. And let me show you how that works. Let me get a chart on the screen. Let me get yours, Anne Marie. Level 2. There you are. Let's go ahead. So which one were we looking at, Anne Marie?
Well, with Pluto retrograde, all of them.
Well,
But-
Pluto, it doesn't matter if the slower moving planet is retrograde. It's only if
Okay.
the faster moving planet is retrograde.
Okay, well, then the only one, well, Uranus and Mercury stationary. So
Yeah, it's you have a Mercury stationary. It's in red on this chart, so it's likely that it's retrograde.
yeah, it's stationing retrograde. Yeah.
So for instance, you will see on this grid right here, can you see it?
Mhm.
A Mars Mercury conjunction is in this square right here. Do you see it?
Right. Yes.
It's that little A says it's applying, which means it's going back toward the Mars. Normally, a faster moving planet at a larger degree would be separating like that as a conjunction, but because the Mercury is stationary, retrograde, about to go retrograde, in effect retrograde, just a very slow Mercury, it is applying back to Mars.
Okay, so then it's applying that way toward Pluto, and Pluto stays where it is. Okay.
I don't know what you just said. Say that again.
Because Pluto is retrograde,
Ignore-
that's the base. I don't pay any
Ignore.
attention to that.
Ignore that.
Right,
So
okay.
if you're looking at the Uranus Pluto conjunction, right?
Uh-huh.
What's really interesting is this computer considers it separating, which is true. Actually, that is true, because this would
Uranus is
normally be,
faster.
right. This would normally be an applying conjunction. Do you see it? 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, as Uranus gets closer and closer to Pluto. But because it is retrograde, it is now going back. It's going, 10, 9,
Gotcha.
right? So it's separating from the conjunction.
Yeah, okay.
And
Cool.
these are really super nitpicky fine points that you may or may not take into account in the interpretation. These are finer points that can, but it is a technicality that I like to teach because it is correct. That is the correct way to look at it. All right.
Thank you.
You bet, Anne-Marie. All right, Tracy.
Hi, yeah. My question was about applying versus separating, and because I was using just a chart off of AstroDeist. And so I was confused on how that worked.
So applying and separating is specifically related to an aspect. So for instance, if there are two planets that are not in aspect, let's say Saturn and the moon, right? There's no aspect to be applying or separating to, though in the bigger scheme of things, the moon is separating from Saturn overall, but we aren't using it that way. We're using it in direct correlation to an aspect. So whether the aspect itself, like this, Uranus-Pluto conjunction on the screen is in fact a separating conjunction because Uranus is pulling away, back the other way, where
We're talking about the slower move or the faster moving planet, what it's doing in relation to the slower moving planet.
always.
Okay, that's the question.
Yeah, it's always taking that perspective as we look at how the faster moving planet is, how it is moving away from or toward the slower moving planet in an aspect. So no matter what you're doing, you're always starting with the slowest moving planet, going in a counterclockwise motion, figure out the angle, determine whether there's an aspect. If indeed there is an aspect, the question is this applying or a separating aspect? So that's the sort of the order of things. In a pair of planets, choose your slowest moving planet, go in a counterclockwise motion from Pluto. We go from Pluto to Mars. In this case, that's counterclockwise in the order of the archetypes, the zodiac. Once we determine the angle, which this one is like 122 degrees, I can eyeball it. It's 122 degrees in a minute. So we know that, I know that is a first quarter aspect or a first quarter phase. I also know that 120 degrees is a trine. So the question is at 122.01, is that a separating trine or an applying trine?
Right, separating.
Correct.
Great, thank you.
You bet. All right, Natalie, you got your hand up.
Quick question, Laura. Thank you for going over all of this. I'm sorry I'm not on camera right now. Just when I just want to just check that I heard you correctly when you said, that your program is showing, Uranus and Pluto as, whether it's separating or applying, that it doesn't necessarily, some people wouldn't take that into account or something. I'm just wondering in EA, like when would it not be taken? I mean, to me, it feels like I would imagine that's always important to.
Every little thing is important, but it's a minor point. It's a finer point that I'm not going to worry about right now. So,
I understand. Okay. Yeah.
For instance, if I'm looking at Anne-Marie's Pluto-Uranus, I want to know, and I already know, that's a balsamic phase. Uranus is balsamic to Pluto. That goes into my interpretation. The fact that Uranus is pulling away from Pluto, going back into a little further into the balsamic, tells me a fine point that this soul isn't quite ready to be finished with the process yet. It is pulling back away from the Pluto instead of moving back into Pluto to go back across. It's just kind of taken a little slower route.
Yes, thank you for explaining that, Laura. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Great, thank you.
Okay. So we can make this class as short as you want. We can make it as long as you want. I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have in any particular way that has to do with the math. I'm happy to put up your charts if you want to look at them to check on your math. Once you've done the first row of Pluto and you've sent it to me, and I've, either made some corrections or told you you're good to go, you can finish the rest of the grid.
I have a question. So this evolutionary astrology is based on Pluto. So if we're talking about the phases of other planets, is that as relative? If it's, Moon, Jupiter versus a Pluto phase?
Everything's relevant and everything's important. Our base is Pluto and everything builds from that. So the rest of the information for me is important. But it is all in the context of the soul work. Does that help,
Yeah.
Virginia?
Yeah, thank you.
Anybody want to go over their math? Take a look at something. Sydney, you have your hand up.
Yeah, hi. So earlier when I did numbers with you, we were doing Mars and Mercury on my chart. And I came up with it being balsamic, and you said that it could also be considered a conjunction.
Hang on, let me pull up
Yep,
your
of
chart
course.
and then let me look at it and then refresh my brain as to what we were talking about.
Mhm.
Okay, so I remember. So let me put it on the screen. So everybody else can, all right, share screen. All right, so there's Sydney's chart. Sydney is talking about her Mars, Mercury. So here is this cluster of Taurus planet, right? That runs from 20 degrees to 8 degrees. And Mercury is in fact going back away from Mars, right? It is an 8-degree, 32-minute separation of a conjunction. Does everybody follow that? And it's okay if you don't, because I basically just subtracted 20 degrees, 3 minutes from 28 degrees, 35 minutes and got 8 degrees, 32 minutes of arc. That is the angle. So it is a new phase, or it is if I then subtract it from the 360, because I'm going backwards, I know that it's balsamic. So this is, if I subtract, what did I say, 832 from, I'm just doing a shortcut here. We're looking at 8 to 1. We're looking at certainly very late balsamic phase of 351.28, something like that. Is that what the angle is?
Yes.
351.28?
So it's just outside of that 8 degrees for separating.
Yeah,
But
it is. It is about 8.5 degrees, a little more than 8.5 degrees. And that is a call that an astrologer would have to make, since Mercury is conjunct the sun and the sun is conjunct Chiron and Chiron is conjunct the sun. Mercury gets dragged a bit more into this orbit and more into this conjunction because of its connection to the other planets.
okay, that
It
makes
kind of
sense.
plays a bit of leapfrog
Right.
by the fact that there is a 5-degree flying conjunction from the sun to Mars. It's dragging this Mercury a bit with it.
Okay. Now I
So
understand.
that will be a judgment call that each of you, when you're looking at orbs, you'll have to make for yourself. Does that feel like it belongs? You might also find, and I got to remember to talk about this in class. You also find that on these wide separating aspects, that it often resolves itself earlier in life. Like the soul just came in to finish up a few minor details and may get those done earlier. And then you have some very stubborn little souls that may hang on to those patterns.
What do you consider earlier in life?
I don't know, just earlier than now. It's all, I can't tell you how many times a client has said when I've detailed a aspect that's separating, they'll go, when I was in my 20s, I dealt with that and I'm 40 now, or, I really feel like I cleaned that up, or that really shifted for me when I was 10 or I was 15, or, just one of those things that I can't tell you when it is, but.
I feel like I've just heard people use those phrases a lot, like earlier or later in life. And I'm like, but what is that official, officially, but I guess
There
more
isn't an official
objective. Yeah.
objective.
And do you consider Chiron in like your stellium, like in the definition of stelliums? Because they say it's usually like planets or inner planets or whatever. Like, do you consider those as an evolutionary astrologer?
Yeah. Okay. So let's first of all define a stellium. There are different interpretations. There are different measurements for stelliums. Some people believe it's 3 or more planets. I say bah humbug, because you can have easily the sun, Mercury, and Venus in the same sign relatively. true stelliums need to have 5 or more. 3 or more are a preponderance in that sign. Your grandmother would tell you that emphatically, Miss Sydney. Yes.
So really 5.
Yeah, she was very adamant. 5 makes a stellium. 3 or 4 is a preponderance. And then anything more than 5 is just a, crap ton of it. That's an
Got
official term for me.
Okay, thank you.
Natalie, you had your hand up. You brought it down. Where are you?
Oh, I was just laughing. I love the official term crap ton.
Yeah, I know, right?
No, what I was actually laughing about, and I just thought I'd put my hand up, was, when you say earlier and later in life, I hear a lot, in another type of work. I just wonder, just a suggestion, whether people mean like earlier than you might expect or later than, like, for the social norms, what you
point.
might
That's a good
expect. I don't
point.
know,
I
just a
don't-
suggestion.
I hear you. And in this scenario, no, I wouldn't be saying that, though. In my own mind, it might be earlier than I thought, but it's probably not earlier than the person thought. Do you know what I'm saying?
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, that's great. Yeah. Okay, thanks, Laura. Thanks.
But I think the real premise to get with a wide separating, or even, well, no, let's go with the wide separating aspects, is that the energy coming into this life is there, but it may get resolved sooner, right? It could just be that the soul has a few loose ends. to tie. You all right there, Natalie?
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought I was on mute. Yeah, I am. Thank you. Yep.
I'll put you on mute for you.
Thank you. I can't see it.
Anne,
Further to the question of whether it's resolved early or later, I'm curious to know, how would you know? What would be the hallmarks of an earlier integration?
that's what I'm saying. I'm saying that a wide separating aspect could just have some details to finish up, and they may get them done early, right? They
Right.
may not be dragging them forward in life, and particularly as you get into progressions. And if you looked at Sydney's progressions over time, you'll see that progressed Mercury pulling away from the sun, and it gets further and further away from Mars. And then at some point it went, station by progression, and then turns around and comes back in. And so there is a revisiting of that, right? So there's certainly a revisiting dynamic that's happening here. And in my mind, it is, there's some things that needed to be cleaned up, finished up in terms of, I would get into the details here about, if as a client, I would talk about the Mars Mercury concept, right? And so speaking directly, Mars Mercury, speaking directly what it is you intend to mean, what's of value to you, Taurus. These are all mucked about with Chiron in the middle of them, and that Mercury retrograde in there, the focus of a bunch of yods. So there's a lot of issues around that. And so that Mercury Mars is only a small piece. It may get resolved, but there's a lot of other things that are outstanding and that need to be dealt with. And that Mercury is outside of these yods. You can see these 27, 29, 25, 28. These are really going to the Mars and Chiron and a bit to the sun. So that Mercury is left out of those. So there's something about it in there that I would try to suss out in the interpretation.
At some point in our class structure, are we going to go over yods because they're wild?
We are going to go over configurations such as yods, grand trines, grand squares, kites, and so on. We will have a class about that, yes.
With Chiron, I think I've heard you say, Laura, that Chiron doesn't have a sign assigned to it. It's kind of.
It doesn't rule anything.
Doesn't rule anything.
It has been more associated with mutable cross overall by a lot of astrologers, most strongly because as Chiron is a centaur correlated to Sagittarius, but also as the wounded healer associated with Virgo. So they're strongly implied there, but there isn't a rulership dynamic.
So it's treated a little bit differently than.
Right, it is a comet. It is not an anchored body, though it did come into our solar system in 1978. I do not or have not done any research to find out when or if Chiron will leave our solar system. But I believe it's here for a reason, describing and representing components within consciousness that we were meant to deal with as those things arose within, because at the time of Chiron's discovery, awareness, the whole concept of healing the inner child was already on the table. It was already starting to filter into consciousness, the wounded nature. Alice Miller's work, The Drama of the Gifted Child, Thou Shalt Not Be Aware, the trauma signatures of the child. I mean, these are wounds. These were all coming out at the time that Chiron was discovered. So, but it is not a spherical body that holds persistent orbit. It is a very elliptical body. I mean, it's here for now. We don't know. I don't know. I haven't done any research to find out if they know whether Chiron is here to stay or whether it will be slipping back out of our solar system.
Thank you.
Nodes are not often included, Virginia, in stelliums because it is not a physical mass. I would certainly hold Chiron in a stellium, but the fact that if you have 4 planets and the nodes in a sign, that's significant. Does it technically meet the criteria of a stellium? Maybe, maybe not, but then and again, I don't think it's a big deal one way or the other. You know, I don't interpret that mass of planets differently because there's 5 or 4.
And is in the same sign the criteria for a
It
stellium?
is in the same sign. It's not in a house, it's the sign.
Okay.
Just
Hey,
out of,
Tracy, go ahead, and then Lenora, you'll come next. Tracy, what's up? Your microphone's not on, my dear.
I sent you my aspect sheet if we get to that. And it's a thing we want to do.
Yeah, I can. These are really hard to flip around and really hard to
Sorry.
see.
Try again.
I'm like, I mean, I can look at it really quick. If you want to just read them off to me, then I can tell you whether you're on the right track.
Okay.
Just read start with Pluto's sun
Yep.
and
I
then
have-
read the degrees and minutes.
356.69.
Okay, so that's a good one. Here's a good one. This is a good place to stop for a second. So I'm gonna put up Tracy's, actually, can I do a whiteboard? I can do a whiteboard. Board. Did that work? Hey, there's a whiteboard. All right, now let's see if I can get some writing going. What's happening? Don't do that. I need to find my special magical pen. Well, it's having a little freak out there on the screen, isn't it? I don't know what it's doing. All right, there it is. All right, so you said you had
56.69.
So that crashed my system, so I'm not gonna use a whiteboard. So I'm just gonna put back up Sydney's chart because I just need some white space to write on. And I'm hoping this will write. All right, so what were the degrees? You had 300.
356.69.
Okay. So here is your issue. This is correct.
Oh, of course. Yeah, no, I got you right now. As soon as you scored, I got it. Yeah.
So what is it?
357.9.
Okay, so what's the phase?
Balsamic,
And what's the aspect, if there is any?
it's conjunction.
Is it applying or separating?
Applying.
Okay, so we'll move on to the next, and instead of me asking you questions, you'll go through all of that. All right, so
Okay.
Pluto sun, Pluto moon.
145.33.
You're off 10 degrees.
I am. Okay. Well, then let's just skip it.
Hang
And
on,
see what doesn't
let me
happen.
check for sure. That is Pluto moon, Pluto
Yeah.
moon. Yeah, you're off 10 minutes, 10 degrees, a whole 10 degrees. It should be 155.
Okay. 155.33.
Mm-hmm.
That's still gibbous.
Yep.
But that would be separating.
You might want to count it as an aspect. I have not, since it is truly separating away from Pluto, but that'll be a judgment call you can make. On to Pluto Mercury
22.15.
phase,
New
Pluto Venus
158.
158,
Balsamic 158.
158.
Uh-huh. What do I have? Pluto Venus? Oh, no, that's not right.
No,
What? I just did it wrong. What did I do?
it's 358.
358. That makes more sense.
Yeah, it does. And what is it?
358. Well, 358 is balsamic, it's still balsamic and applying.
Applying what?
Conjunction.
Great, perfect. Pluto Mars,
41.27.
perfect.
New
Pluto
phase
Jupiter.
separating.
No, you don't need separating. It's just new phase. There's no aspect.
Okay, so only if there's an aspect.
Yep.
Okay, so where am I? Jupiter?
Pluto Jupiter.
186.46. Full.
You're off a bunch. 186, you're off. Well, you're off 30 degrees. You just didn't count up right.
Okay.
So you're off exactly 30 degrees.
Okay, which way though?
It should be 216.46.
Okay, that's still full.
Yeah, it is a full phase. It's true.
Yeah, okay.
Pluto Saturn,
156.30. Gibbous.
keep going.
Uh,
Pluto Chiron,
Chiron, 178.12.
you're off just a little bit. Pluto Chiron should be,
Feels like third grade all over again.
I know, isn't it? Yeah, the angle is 180.54, thereabouts, because it's
Okay.
rounded up. So it's a full phase opposition. And because Chiron is retrograde, it's applying back to the opposition with Pluto.
Okay. Okay. So continue. Okay.
Pluto Uranus.
Yeah, 354.04.
Okay,
Balsamic conjunction applying.
yep. And then the last one, Pluto Neptune,
51.28.
off 10 degrees.
Keep doing that. 51.28. Okay, so which way?
Well, and Pluto and Neptune have been in almost nearly perpetual sextile for a very long time. So they're 61.28.
61.28. Okay, so that would be separating.
Yep. And what phase is that?
Oh, crescent.
So just detail that a little bit. It's really just watching your math, and it's easy to make those little simple math errors, and also to miss a sign, not to count them all the way. That's why it's handy when you're looking at, let me pull your chart real quick. when you are looking and at your grid, stop that. Obnoxious. Here we go. So this grid right here is really handy. So are the lines in the chart. So for instance, on your Pluto Neptune, here's Pluto Neptune. It's showing it's a sextile and the orb is 1 degree 28 minutes. It's applying because Neptune,
It's no, it's
no,
not.
Neptune's not retrograde. Why has it got it applying? That makes absolutely no sense. This is actually, it's very possible that Neptune is slowing down, but I would ignore that. This is in fact a separating sextile. And you basically take, anyway, it's right there. You see it. And so you can check your work against your chart. And that's what
I
you want. to
wasn't
do.
using this chart. I was using my iPad. So I was
Right.
on Astro. So yeah, I didn't realize that was even there.
So in your folder for the previous class, well, even for this class, I'm sorry, it's this class. The folder, there are charts in the folder. So
Great.
your chart's there and you can print it.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. So one of the things that I am confident with in doing aspects and phases and why I teach the math, though it may not feel necessary, because the computer is going to do it for you if you have a computer software. You can look at the chart and develop the shortcuts, but what's really going to help you is doing the math. Doing the math will help you see it holistically. It'll help you understand what these angles are really about, and they'll help you in the long run to be able to eyeball the aspects and the phases without doing the math. So it gives you a view of the chart you wouldn't have. Giving you the shortcuts ahead of time actually might confuse some of you. And particularly if you really don't grasp what an angle is, and some people don't. I'm going to tell on Jen. Jen really didn't grasp it, and it was doing the math that really gave her, oh, that's what this is, because it was abstract up to that point. Right? You're shaking your head no, but that's true, right? That's what you told me.
I'm just shaking my head because you said you were going to call me out and you thought I wasn't here because my camera was off. But no, it's true. It gives me a much more physical, like, view of what the chart's doing now that I have the math, and it's not just some weird nebulous, like, oh, phases, oh, balsamic, and like actually I can, kind of move things around in my head a little bit about with degrees and everything. So that it definitely helps.
Awesome.
Can you clarify that a little further? I guess I thought the angles were 0, 90, 180, but it's more than that. So it's
There's an angle at every degree.
Okay.
That some of those angles are hyper-specific and create aspects,
Okay.
but there is an angle at every degree. When you separate from the 0 point, you go 1 degree, that's a 1 degree separation. That's still an angle, right?
Okay.
The critical angles that we designate as aspects are 0, 30, 45, 60, 72, 90, 120, 150, 180, and then back around the other side.
Okay. Thank you.
Laura, I have a question.
Yes, my dear.
So for instance, if you're like looking at a square, which is 90 degrees, but if it's like 89 degrees, would you still consider that a square?
Oh, for heaven's sakes, yes, that's an applying square, Isabel.
Oh, okay.
That's applying square. That's a crescent square. That's a big, fat, juicy square.
Got it.
Yeah. So remember, when we're dealing with orbs, that applying square, which is the crescent square, that's the applying side of it. That gets 10 degrees. So you go all the way back to 80, and that's a square. applying.
Is there any special significance if it hits it right on the nose at 90?
Well, for me, it would tell me that it's at that resonant, most powerful, potent point of the aspect, and it is at 90 becomes the first quarter. It's coming out of crescent. I am going to hold that in my mind, but it is on the nose, a first quarter phase at its most intense. Lenora?
Could you just quickly go over how to read the triangle grid with all the aspects and angles?
Absolutely.
Because I always get so confused about it. Thank you.
So you're talking about this right here, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So this grid is a representation of all these lines.
Mm-hmm. That I get. It's all the little, like,
Right.
you know, I get the symbols in there, but the numbers and the letters underneath,
Okay.
that's where I'm like,
So
whoa.
for instance, in Tracy's chart, she has a Mars moon trine. We can see Mars at 23 Libra coming over to a 17-degree Aquarius moon. We see that's a trine. This is telling you it's not exact, that it's almost 6 degrees separate, applying from the trine. That means the trine is really at 234. That's the angle, 234 and some change, I think, or a little bit more. And so when you add that 6 degrees to it, you get to 240. And that's the exact aspect. So this gives you the orb. So the numbers are the orb from the exact aspect. And the A or the S tells you whether it's applying to the exact aspect or separating from the exact aspect.
Got it. So if you look at her Saturn moon, for instance, because that says 0A57.
Right?
Let me just see here. Oh, it's
Yeah.
conjunct, obviously.
Yeah, it's conjunct. It's telling you
yeah,
the symbol is
yeah.
conjunct, and it's almost a full degree applying in.
Yeah.
But
Got it.
it's a little bit closer than that, and it's a very close applying conjunction.
Okay, thank you for that. That makes it so easy. Wow. Yeah.
Perfect. Yeah. I love it. I much prefer students to ask the questions, because then your mind is like right there for it versus me telling you, and then your mind's going, what? What? All right, Virginia, your question.
Sorry, it's a trivial software question. If you're using 323 wheels, meaning, the Progress Plus, is there a grid that shows that, or you can only have 2 in the grid?
You can only have 2 in the grid.
Okay, I didn't know if the software did.
In SolarFire, you can have a tri-wheel or a bi-wheel, but you're not going to get the grids that go with it. Only
Okay.
the grid goes with one chart.
Okay.
All right. Or you
Thank
can get a grid, a synastry grid between the 2 charts. Say if you wanted to run the aspects between a natal chart and a progression, then you could run it in a synastry grid, but you can also do it in a transit report.
Okay, great. I wasn't sure if the software did it or not. Thank you.
All right. Mary?
Can you tell me about this little chart thing? How does it work?
That is a Rose thing. But
Okay.
I have used aspect finders, and I am bummed. I have an aspect finder, and for the life of me, hang on, let me see where I put it. I bought a second one because, here it is. Yay, I found it. All right, so this is an official aspect finder that I got from AFA bookstore. Back in the day, it was really, really thick cardboard. Now it's this super thin stuff, and I adhered it to a piece of cardboard to give it more stability. So on that one, as well as this one, there should be a symbol for a conjunction. And in this case, it's right there. I have to do things backwards. Do you see that conjunction symbol, everybody?
Can you remove the screen share so we can see?
Oh, sure.
Yeah, thank you.
I wanted to use it with a chart, so, but I will do, that makes it harder, actually. Do you see that conjunction point right there? Where's my finger? There. That on this movable thing, you would put on the slowest moving planet. So pick a planet, Lenora, from your chart, any planet, and make it the slower one first. Your microphone just landed off, honey.
Let's take Neptune.
What is the degree and minutes of Neptune and its sign?
It's in Sagittarius and it's 0934.
So it's 09. So we go around the wheel and we put the conjunction sign on 09. That's 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. I'll show you. Okay. So the conjunction point I've put on, can you see it, Lenora? Can you see it, Mary?
Yeah.
You see where it's sitting pointing to 9? Oh, is it 09 or is it 9? It's 9 degrees, right?
9 degrees, 34 minutes.
Great. All right. So we'll just start there and then pick a faster moving planet.
Let's take Jupiter.
Okay. And where is Jupiter?
It's at 9 degrees, 59 Pisces.
9:59 Pisces. So what we would do is on this wheel, we would look for Pisces. We see Aries over here. And then we would look for 9 degrees Pisces, and we see it's right by a square. In fact, that is a square. And I put labels on it, and it is 9 degrees when that's that. It's either a you said 9 degrees and 9 degrees. What were the minutes on that? On the Neptune? I have to do
34.
Yeah.
And Jupiter is 59. So almost 10 degrees.
Yeah, so it's crescent. So it's kind of hard to see, and that's why doing the math is to be able to do it on a finer point. When you land right there on the square, you're going to have to do the math to figure out whether you're applying or separating. But I used this for years. I did this so that I didn't have
so
to
smart
because I didn't have a computer that did it. We didn't have that back in the day. So these were made for, and I turned it into a phase finder by drawing the lines and then using my label maker to put in the little, phases. And so, like I said, back in the day, figuring out aspects and figuring out phases, this was much faster than doing the math, although I can do the math super fast now. So your little phase finder, Mary, that one should work basically the same. So if you wanted to use it, you might want to mount it to some cardboard to give it some stability to move it around.
A little floppy, but thank you.
A little floppy. And this one is definitely flimsy underneath the cardboard. But I do like it. I've used them for years. It's called the Circle Book Aspect Finder. And it's nice. But most of you are going to have a computer to do that, to figure that stuff out. Hopefully you'll be able to eyeball things over time. It really only comes down to some finer points. But even with my computer, if I'm not, if I'm looking at an aspect grid, all right, so I'm going to show you two things. Let me open up. Let me close that, close that, close that. Got so much open on my screen. Save, close. 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 All right, so I'm going to pull out do you guys have your aspect, not your aspect, your circle with your aspects and phases on it. Let me get this. This is the aspect. Guess this is the one I want. Yeah, it's not in color, but that'll be fine. All right. So I'm going to give you a few shortcuts right at the moment. Hang on, I want to share my whole screen so I can move between them. So you can see this chart right now, Tracy's chart. And when you look in the grid, you'll see that she has a Mercury moon sesquiquadrate. When we look on this diagram here, kind of small, you'll see that there are 4 sesquiquadrates. There's 2 here. All right, so there's, let's see if I can get my drawing implement. It's really just being obnoxious. It's not going to let me draw. It's Mercury retrograde, folks. All right, so your first quarter sesquiquadrate is the applying sesquiquadrate. Your gibbous is your separating on this side. Over on the other side, your applying sesquiquadrate is full, and the separating is disseminating. The reason I bring this up is if you know what they are, and you look at a chart, we go back to Tracy's chart, and we know that this is a sesquiquadrate, but we don't know which one just by looking at this. We know it's one of the applying ones with the moon. Does anybody remember what the 2 applying sesquiquadrates are that I just pointed out? It's gibbous and full. Those are the 2 applying sesquiquadrates, right? So it's one of those. We can narrow that down. We know that it's one of those 2. It's an applying, so we know it's either it is either a first quarter or a full, not a gibbous. I may have confused you there, and my brain is really tired right now. So let me say that again and make sure I got that correct in your brains. The 2 applying sesquiquadrates are the first quarter sesquiquadrate and the full sesquiquadrate. All right, so having said that, if I screwed it up, looking at Tracy's chart, we know that it's one of those 2, a first quarter or a full. We look at her Mars, and we know that on one side, excuse me, not Mars, Mercury. God, I got so little sleep last night. I'm surprised I'm able to even function. If we look at the Mercury, we see this dotted red line with this little square Q, and that's the sesquiquadrate. If the moon is prior to the opposition point, then it's the first quarter applying. If it's after the opposition, it would be the full phase. So you can easily look at the chart knowing there's a sesquiquadrate. I know it's either a first quarter or a full, and I can see that the Mercury, from Mercury to the moon, has not reached past the opposition point. So this is in fact a first quarter. I didn't have to do the math. I could have done the math. I can, in fact, do the math from there. That symbol represents 135 degrees. It's applying, and I would subtract 142 from it, and that would give me my angle. So there's all kinds of shortcuts to be had. There isn't any reason to know the math beyond it gives you this holistic view and gives you a greater understanding of the circle and how those phases and angles work, how they're created. But in the long run, when you're doing a reading, for me to know The exactitude of the angle is not necessary. For me to know that this is a first quarter sesquiquadrant is what's important from an interpretive point of view. So that grid is a helpful thing. And you can go ahead and even use it instead of the grid you've got. This is simple, is to just go ahead and write the phase into the grid when you're doing a reading for every aspect. You don't have to do the rest of them. You don't have to do the ones that don't have aspects per se. There are some like Mars, Venus. This one, Tracy has a Mars, Venus aspect, but not everybody has a Mars, Venus aspect. But the Mars, Venus phase is important, regardless of the aspect. Pluto, Mars phase, important, regardless of whether you have an aspect. Sun, Moon phase. These are called key planetary pairs, which we will go over in a class that you will be in this session, that we'll be going through. We'll be doing a class on key planetary pairs and aspect configurations. Pardon me.
What was the planetary pair with Venus?
Mars, Venus is a key, what we call a key planetary pair. We'll go over those later. Mary, you had a question?
If I were to take a class on how to do your whole chart without using the computer, would I have to do like quadratic equations, or would it pretty much be adding and subtracting like this?
There's a lot of addition and subtraction. You're working in a base 60. There are logarithms to deal with and do multiplication with logarithms, but a logarithm chart comes with it. I teach chart construction. I've taught it. I taught one not too long ago online, but it's not unmanageable. I think it's very cool to learn how to calculate a chart by hand. Now, I can do a chart on the computer in less than 30 seconds. It all is limited by how fast I can type. Doing a chart by hand takes just the base calculations, can take 20 to 30 minutes.
Yeah, it sounds like it's very long and involved, but if it's just mostly adding, subtracting, maybe multiplying, dividing, that's a lot more manageable than a lot of algebra.
Yeah, there's no algebra.
Oh, okay.
There's a logarithm table and you have to do multiplication and division. And so you have to convert time and space and all of that. But I have worksheets and instructions that are detailed down to, the very minute parts of how to do it. So
because this really did help me understand the phases and stuff like that. May not be quite ready for the whole chart yet, but it's good to know that it's manageable.
Yeah, there's something about, is anybody in education? Have you heard of Piaget?
Oh, who's that?
Piaget was a educational theorist who came up with the concept of constructivism. And the theory of constructivism was applied a lot to Montessori, and that they did not teach a child the abstract of 1 + 1 = 2, but said you have a bean or a bead or a whatever, and you have another one. Look at that. You have one here and you have one here. The concept of Piaget's is that the human brain will construct math from that. That you don't actually teach the child math, you teach them components of math, and they will construct it. Right? I love that theory of constructivism, and I apply it broadly to the math of astrology, because when you start doing the math of astrology, you get this constructivistic look of the chart that you wouldn't get. It's all abstraction. And what's important to understand is all the symbols in the chart are shortcuts for something, right? The Aries symbol is a shortcut for all of the things we apply to it, but it's also a mathematical shortcut. Aries, the symbol Aries represents 0, to 2959. Taurus represents 30 up to 3959, right? Those symbols have mathematical representations as well as they represent all the ideas and concepts that we apply to them. These symbols here that we're using for aspects, a conjunction is a symbol for 0. An opposition is a symbol for 180. The trine is a symbol for 120. They have mathematical or numerical orientations. And when you are thinking about math, harmonics, music even, and we have these harmonic notes and harmonics within astrology, these are aspects. They have resonance. They have energy around them. They represent things. So everything in that we use, all the symbols we use are really shortcut notations for the information we import on it, but then also mathematically they are shortcuts for math. Like Capricorn represents 270 degrees on the zodiac. That's the beginning of Capricorn. From 270 just prior to 300. You hit 300, that's a sextile, and that's 0 Aquarius. So all those things have meaning. The half squares and the sesquiquadrats, these are 15 degrees fixed. Those hold meaning. For me, they hold meaning. 15-degree fixed, what does it mean? We will cover that in the classes moving forward. And so, a lot of the stuff gets schlepped into the realm of the abstract when it has in many ways, real concrete dynamics. From a math point of view, it does. Angles, math, all of that. So, yeah, Isabel.
Laura, who is the person that did that thing where they envisioned each degree and then they wrote about
Called the Sabian symbols.
Sabian symbols, yeah.
And that was Mark Edmund Jones and a woman who was sort of the channel for that. I cannot remember her name.
Wheeler, Kelsey Wheeler.
Is that it?
I think so.
Okay. So anyway, she was the channel for that, for each degree, the sort of the original Sabian symbols from Mark Edmund Jones. And then they've been tinkered with over time by, there's a woman out of Australia who did some cards. Why can't I remember her name? I know her. Anyway, there's a lot of astrologers who tinkered around with that. And as a meditation, as a tool. I don't go that far because I just think for me, I think simple is better. And that I think that all the information that I need is probably in the symbols I've got. Linda Hill, thank you, Virginia.
So, sorry, I'm just trying to use that as a way to understand how these work. So if she's
it's not anything
No?
to do
Okay.
with it. No, that was all visionary channeled information.
But if she says 10 degrees Leo, she's actually talking about
11.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, because 0 is really 1, 1 is really 2. So it's not anything to do with what we're doing here, not even remotely. They are truly apples and kittens. They're not even in the fruit realm.
Not even oranges.
Nope. Nope. Hearing a lot of feedback from somebody's microphone. Just gonna mute everybody. There we go. All right, unless you have a question, unmute yourself. We do have a little bit, we have another hour. We don't have to use it all, mind you.
I have a question.
Sure, Mary.
Last week, one of you mentioned, might have been Patricia, I'm not sure, but she said if you learn to understand all of the different holidays on the pagan calendar, then that also helps you understand all of the phases. And I was wondering if there's a good book about that.
There was, and I was by Mary Sims. It was pretty much an older book, Mary K. Sims, on the connection between the the wheel here and the pagan calendar. I do not believe per se that the knowledge of the pagan calendar will lead you automatically to understanding each of these phases. But there is a correlation. For instance, the spring, the equinox is, I much prefer to think about it at Aries in terms of the initiation process.
Okay.
This 15 degrees of Taurus is May 2nd, and it's Beltane, May Day, but Beltane. And so this is, I don't necessarily see that correlation strictly just to the holiday itself there, but this is Beltane. The 90-degree square is summer solstice. Here you've got 15 of Leo. You're going to be in August. You're going to be in Lunasa, which is a grain or harvest festival. The 180 degree is your opposition, and that is the first day of fall. So that's the autumnal equinox. Up here you have 15 degrees of Scorpio. And so you have Samhain, All Saints Day, Halloween, Hallowmas, depending on what you call it. And again, if you were to calculate these correctly and go to the when the sun reaches 15 degrees of fixed, that's the actual holiday itself. They've been fixed to about the 2nd of the month, but the real energy really exists at 15 degrees when the sun hits that 15-degree mark. And so Samhain certainly carries with it at that 15-degree mark a whole lot of energy around the veils being thinner, and there's a whole lot of stuff that comes with that. And certainly there are a lot of really good books on understanding the pagan holidays versus all the one that I said from Maria K. Sims, who I think that was her who associated them along this wheel. Then you have up here at 270 degrees, you have the winter solstice. And then here you have 15 degrees of Aquarius, and you have Imbolc. And so that's Candlemas. The Christianized version is Hallowmas here. And oh God, what is Lunasa? Lunasa is boy, I've erased them from my brain, to be honest, the more Christianized, because Mas is a mass. But this is 15 degrees Aquarius is the dark of winter, and it's the celebration of light, the return of the light. You've hit midway point in the winter elements here, and it's sort of like now the light is beginning to truly return, and we've made it the food we put away in our stores, we're celebrating that it has made it. We light our candles in honor of the light that's returning. I mean, there's all kinds of very cool, I've been practicing these all of my adult life, but the fact that they are associated with this wheel is just the synchronicity of it all, right? There isn't anything separate.
Well, do you have a favorite book about just understanding the holidays in general?
Well, I have a lot of them. I have, let's see, what have I got over here? I think I loaned them all to my daughter-in-law. Yeah, I did. I need to get those all back from her. So right now I can't pull them off the top of my head because I loaned the books out. But
Okay.
But if you want to search out some books and then send me the links, and I'll take a look at them and let you know whether I think they're all right.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. Any other questions?
Yeah, it's about the holidays too. In in relation to what Mary asked, because I'm not sure I completely get it. Is it the energy of the holiday that relates to what the different phases
Some
represent
people-
or mean?
Some people make that correlation from the energy. I like the fact that they are connected. So for instance, let's see if I can actually get my pen to work today. Don't know why. Nope. You're not going to work, are you? You're just not. So annoying. What's the point of having it if it's not gonna work? So, all right, so. All right, let's do it this way. All right, I got another option. So I'm a visual person. Let's type on this thing.
Me too.
Right, so this is 0 Aries, right? Oops. Right, so the 0 on this 0 conjunction, 0 degrees is Aries, right? So this is at 30 degrees, this is 0 Taurus.
Yes.
This is 15 degrees Taurus,
Uh-huh.
right? We're following, right?
Yeah.
This is 0 degrees Gemini.
Yeah.
This is 0 degrees Cancer. This is 0 degrees, 120 is 0 degrees of Leo.
Mm-hmm.
This is 15 degrees of Leo. Right?
And
This
on
is-
and on.
and on and
Yeah.
on and on. Now,
Yeah.
you
And
can
then what-
now correlate 0 Aries to a date on the calendar.
Yeah.
Okay?
Spring
So the date on the
equinox, yeah.
calendar is, it's going to be somewhere between March 19th and March 21st, right?
Yeah.
Right? So we celebrate the spring equinox when the sun reaches 0 Aries.
Mhm.
At that point, that's what we're celebrating, that equinox, right? And so it's the newness of spring, it's the rush of beginnings, it's birth, it's all of the things that we might associate with 0 Aries, right?
Mhm.
We get to 15 Taurus, that's another holiday. This 15 degrees of Taurus lands about May 7th. Roughly, it could be May 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, somewhere in there, but we'll pick May 7th. So that energy is the energy of Beltane, right? That's, it is the richness. It's not just the newness of spring. It is now giving substance to spring. Flowers are blooming. The bees are buzzing. In let's say this in Eurocentric northern parts of the world. In the southern part of the world, the southern hemisphere, we're going to get something different at 15 Taurus, right? But in this, from a Northern European, Northern Hemispheric point of view, this is generally speaking that time of the year,
Yeah.
right? And so again, for 0 Cancer, you've got the summer solstice. This is the southern part of the sky. This is, the northern part of the sky. This is the south. This is the north. This is where we are at the height of summer, the heat. The summer solstice is now when the sun reaches its maximum point.
Okay, I guess my question is then, do you use that energy in the chart interpretation of what a first quarter square would represent?
No.
Do you correlate it to?
No, I see the correlation, but I
Yeah.
don't use that in my
Okay.
interpretation. No.
Great.
I would
Okay.
use, conversely, when doing ritual around the holidays, I would use the energy of the archetype and the sign that way in ritual.
Yeah. Okay.
For me, I don't go back the other way. And that doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. It's just that's not the way my brain is working with it.
Great. Thank you for clarifying. Thank
Okay.
you.
Laura, I have a bit of an abstract question, which is like, so you were talking about sort of the Western view of looking at these phases, right? Having a particular energy or did I say
No,
qual-
I'm looking, not the phases. I was looking at the holidays. We know that, again, from a northern point of view, it's 0. Aries is spring. Well, in the southern hemisphere, it's not.
Right, which is what I'm like kind of curious about. Like if somebody's born, you know, in the southern hemisphere, like
Still interpret it same way.
yeah, okay.
Works. I don't change it around.
But
Aries,
there's like Vedic astrology, and that's like a whole nother
no,
thing.
Vedic astrology is a whole different thing. Has
Yeah.
nothing to do with hemispheres. Any other questions?
Yeah, I have one. I think it might be really, really fucking dumb, so
Okay,
we're
well,
gonna
I'll tell
roll
you.
with it. So when you're looking at that, that wheel that you had there with all of the phases on there, and then you're also taking into account a chart that has, you know, we're using the porphyry system and whatever rising. Is it at any point, do you just kind of like look at where planets are? Like for instance, like in my chart, I have that preponderance, we'll say, of Taurus all around that quintile 225 degrees. You take kind of in the back of your mind that energy of 225 or
225 is the sesquiquadrate.
the sesquiquadrate. Sorry
Yeah,
about
it's
that.
a sesquiquadrate. Yeah, I mean, there's an applying and separating orb, you know, it just depends, you know, that it's coming out of quincunxes flowing into sesquiquadrates. You've got a mix of energies there. And so when interpreting those, you've got to look at them individually and then try to make some sense of them in a holistic way.
Right. Okay. So like in the same way that like my Pluto is down in the second house, which is right around the semi-square, I would kind of take that into account in the back of my head, but not necessarily like apply it to like a full translation of whatever, right?
I'm trying to follow what you just said.
So I'm trying to form the question in some sort of way that actually like is fully fleshed out. So like when I was looking at the phases, right, and the semi-square is down there where like Pluto and my Saturn are. Do I take into
I don't see us. Oh, I see what you're saying. No.
Yeah, like okay, perfect. That's all I need to know. Don't explain it any further and I'll just go with no. Thank you.
Yeah, no. However, to throw a wrench into that little mess of something, if this Mercury were at 15, anywhere from 13 to 17 of a fixed sign of Taurus, that would resonate to that phase energy right there at 15 Taurus of the semi-square.
Got it. Okay.
Right? So 15, give or take a couple of degrees on either side of those 15-degree fixed marks, those are leading into the 15 degrees, incredibly resistant, incredibly willful planets. They are like, fuck the world. You can't tell me what to do. You know, you aren't the boss of me is the applying semi-squares. They're applying half square at 15 Taurus and the applying half square at 15 Aquarius are like, you're not the boss of me. You can't tell me what to do. And that is that there's a very willful energy about those planets, regardless of whether they have an aspect.
Okay, understood. And is that kind of in the same vein that like the 29th degree of any planet is considered the critical degree?
Well, that's a different thing. So the way I use degree analysis comes down to this. I'm looking at the first 3 degrees, the last 2 degrees, and I'm looking for the middle of 15 fixed, only the fixed, right?
Only the fixed for the 15s.
Right. But I will look for the first 3 degrees, 0 to 3 of any sign, and the last 2 to 3 degrees of any sign.
Got it.
Right.
Okay.
So the first 3 degrees indicates fresh new energy. It's like the new phase. right? So it's like, this has just begun. If it's at the beginning of the first few degrees of a house, same thing. This is energy that has just begun. When a planet is at the last few degrees, particularly the 29th degree, it is at a critical degree. And it is speaking of potential deep procrastination by the soul and mixed with the high potential of mastery. So it's like Sure. So it's like at 29 degrees, you're at a tipping point. So you either fall back or you fall forward. But there's
Right.
a lot
And
of crisis in it.
so when you say the first, would say first 3 degrees of a house, and then you also take into
Account the last degrees of the
the,
house.
or the, so like down where on my chart where Libra is,
Yes.
you know, my Pluto's in the first 3 degrees.
And it's retrograding back toward the first house, which has meaning, implies the first house is also engaged in the interpretation of your chart because it's within a few degrees of the house retrograding back.
Right. But it's also kind of in that the critical degree area with conjunct with Saturn, right?
Saturn's in the critical degree for sure.
Okay.
And
Okay.
it's retrograde and it's balsamic to Pluto, which means that your soul is, you know, been fiddling around with this stuff for a while.
Fun.
Yeah.
When do you
Why,
consider that-
can I ask something? Why is the Saturn not separating from Pluto?
It is separating from Pluto because it is retrograde. But
That's,
I mean, let me rephrase that. Sorry, Lenora. It looks like it's separating, but because Saturn is retrograde, it is applying.
got it.
Okay, sorry, I messed that up.
Reminds me of like Uno when you do like the, you know, the switchback partners, where you get that card where you can like reverse direction.
Switcheroo.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, when you have a planet at the last degree of a house, it's not exactly the same as having a planet at 29 degrees. It just really isn't. But it does speak of finishing up the process. And again, the motion of the planet plays a very important role in this. Let's say Saturn was at the end of that house and it's retrograde. It's not moving forward into the next house. It's coming back from that next house, moving back into this house. So that's part of the interpretation. These are all things these are all subtle things that have to be taken into account that actually change a great deal of the interpretation along the way, particularly this Pluto retrograding back to this house cusp, retrograding back to the first house. It basically means Sydney is a first and second house Pluto. So that can also play when you have a Pluto right smack dab on the cusp, applying into the next cusp. I still read this as a second house Pluto. I would still read this Pluto down here as a second house Pluto, but the fact that this one's applying back to the first or this one's applying to the third has meaning. That's advanced stuff, but y'all ask, so there was. But this degree analysis stuff, it's interesting. I don't break down every degree. I don't break down decants of 10s or duods of 2.5s. There's all kinds of degree analysis out there. And if that makes, you know, if that floats your boat, go for it.
When do you consider it to be a late degree, like starting at like 27?
For me, I really start looking at it at the within 2 degrees. So I'm looking at 28 and 29, 29 being the critical one. And the first few degrees, it's supposed to be up to 3, but really I'm looking at 0, 1, and 2. You know, that in a way is your first 3 degrees, 0, 1, 2. Those are 3 degrees in there. So that's that really does speak to a new, fresh energy. More questions?
One more. So in terms of, I'm just kind of curious about the degrees and how they work with like ascendant, midheaven, descendant, IC.
So what, say that again, what are you asking?
So in terms of like, let's say one of those critical degrees, like either 0 to 2 or 28 to 30, right? Or something, 29. How would that apply if it was like touching a, what do you call them? Like the ascendant or the descendant or the
And the
midheaven or the
angles? The angles?
angles, excuse me, yes, that.
Are you saying if the angles are in those degrees or planets
Yes,
in those
yes,
degrees?
angles over planets, yeah.
Well, when you have your angles at a critical degree, 15 fixed, early, or they're early in the going or late in the going, I take that into account. Just depends, right? There's no one size fits all answer with anything. You have to take the chart into account. What's the context in which that's all happening? Yeah, all these little pieces come into play. And you begin to see over time, you know, right now I wouldn't worry about those things where you're at. But at some point, you're going to start taking this further and further along, and those things do become important. We do a graduation program where you do 2 charts and write homework, and then you do record some readings, and we listen to them, and then we decide whether you are proficient enough and get to have a certificate. And one of those charts is my mother's chart, and she has Pluto in the 12th house retrograding back to the 11th. And if you don't pay attention to that, you will completely and utterly miss the interpretation of her chart. If you read it strictly just as a 12th house Pluto, you'll miss it. Is that vanilla ice cream with chocolate sauce?
It's soup.
Oh. All right. I thought I saw ice cream. You're lying. It's ice cream, right? Just tell me it's vanilla ice cream with chocolate
It's vanilla
sauce.
ice cream with chocolate frosting.
Okay, thank you. And I will live vicariously through that false reality. All right. Any other questions?
One more. On the retrogrades, again, sorry, if it's past the, so if it were going straight and it's an aspect separating, but now it's retrograde, but it's because it's past the aspect, you still call it applying?
Because
Then-
the planet is moving back toward it.
Yeah, so it's applying toward that
It has to
aspect.
do with the motion, right?
Okay.
And if you animate a chart that looks like that has a retrograde, and you animate the chart minute by minute, you'll
Mhm.
see that retrograde either applying or separating depending on which side it's on,
Gotcha. Okay.
right? And so that's really what we're looking at.
Okay. Thanks.
Retrograde doesn't change the phase or the math. The math is the math, the phase is the phase, the aspect is the aspect, right?
Mhm.
But as to whether it's applying or separating, that is the finer point of what that retrograde affects.
Gotcha.
I have a question that may have already been answered, but I was getting Lilia a snack, and so I had stepped away from the computer. You mentioned talking about the middle, you talked about the first couple degrees and then the ending few degrees, and then you talked about the middle 15s only relating, yeah, so fixed what? Just a fixed
Signs,
thank you.
fixed signs, Taurus, Leo, Scorpio, Aquarius.
Thank you.
You bet.
My
babe.
brain could not fill that in for some reason.
Okay. Yeah, I have a lot of fixed in my chart, for those of you who don't know. I have Venus at 13 Aquarius. My angles are fixed. My ascendant descendant are 17 Leo Aquarius. I have the moon at 10 Taurus, Mars at 21 Taurus, Uranus at 15 Leo. I have Saturn, I have Neptune in early Scorpio. I have Ceres at 15 Scorpio, and I have Jupiter at 26. But the ones that really kind of strike that chord of that 15-degree fixed archetype would be my ascendant descendant and my Venus and my Ceres. So those all hit those points. And I have seen, without going into any detail at all, I have seen where that resistance, that willfulness, that stubbornness has played its part in my life.
Do you like typically consider some sort of like orb around that 15? Is it like
Yeah.
13 to 17?
Yeah, it would be the orb of that aspect. Yeah, anywhere from 2.5 to 3 degrees. 2 to 3 degrees is the orb. Yeah. Are you guys good? I'm here for you if you need more. All right. I'm going to call it then. If there aren't any more questions or any way that I can assist you in your math, understanding of phases and aspects. All right, Natalie,
It's
got under the wire.
you need to lay down. Thanks so much, Laura, for going over this as always. It's not my strong point, but anyway, I would be here regardless. Quick question, if I may, on a totally unrelated, it's not really, it's more about the classes coming up.
Sure.
Is the transit class running? The one that you're...
Oh yeah, for sure. It
Okay,
starts
I just wanted to...
on October 6th.
Okay.
We have a transit class happening. If you are interested in taking that class, you will need to register soon. So on the website, on the training page, there's, or advanced or something, I can't remember where Patricia put it, but it is Exploring Transits. It's $250. If you need any assistance with registering for the class, we will, I believe the link is already on the page. Don't we have that? Isn't that a thing? No, it's not. Wait. I know some of you are in that class, so let me refresh my addled brain. Let's see, it is in under advanced learning is the register now button under advanced learning. But what I want to see is, did we do that under RCP? So that there's a link. Yes. So there, once you log yourself in, if you've registered for the class, Natalie, and you click on Exploring Transits, you'll see the link for the Zoom link that's already been established for the class.
Excellent. Okay, thank you, Laura. Quick question on that note as well. Thank you. I'm really glad you're running it. I know that you've talked about other classes being planned. Any prospect of relationship astrology class coming up?
Not that I know of.
Okay.
Right now, because I teach Tuesday, Wednesday, and then starting in October, Thursday every other week, there's really no other opportunity for classes at the moment. When the 6-week transit class ends, we will have to have a discussion about additional materials and what we want. We have a whole list of things.
Yeah.
So it'll just be a matter of what we vote on between the three instructors as to where we'll go with it, whether it's, we have a lot of call for Chiron, asteroids,
Sure.
progressions. I mean, there's a lot of material out there to still be covered. And yeah, so we'll
Yeah.
see. We'll see.
Thank you, Laura.
Stay
Yeah,
tuned.
and I'd vote for all the above that you just listed as well. So thank you. Thanks for running it.
Sure. All right. I'm seeing if I need to save this chart. Did I do it? All right, I guess it's been saved. We can close that. All right. I'm still giving you a little extra time to
I'll ask the question that I had in the chat. Is Porphyry the only house system that can have planets straddling the houses, or are there other house systems?
No. You can always have a like
I mean, of the same size sign.
oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, you can in Porphyry, Placidus, any of the others that are not equal. Well, even with equal house, you could possibly have it. But the only one that will absolutely remove that altogether is whole sign houses. But you can have it in any of the other house systems where planets can straddle and split themselves between houses.
Got it. Thank you.
Virginia, no, the certification program does not require to do charts by hand. We give you the charts to do and then do the analysis of it. I do believe that it is part of a well-rounded education to learn at least how to do a chart by hand. Should the apocalypse come and the computers all fail, or the computers rise up and move against us in some way, then we'll still be able to calculate our charts. All right, I'm done. I am actually going to ask you to hold on just a second because I want to see what we have on the schedule for next week. We actually may have some more math that's not needed. So let me see. There's a lot of folks that didn't come that have elected not to do this part of the class. So that's fine. Where are we? Math tutorial, math review, and shortcuts. So what we'll not be doing probably next week is more math review, unless I'm being asked specifically to run back over it. At this point, I'm going to assume that you all have a sense of what you're doing, and if you don't, that you're going to reach out to me, which please reach out to me. I have already helped students on Zoom, doing Zoom tutorials, one-on-ones, or in a small group. I've done that, but next week we'll probably just run over shortcuts and how to get phases out of different methods. The Rose will show the aspect phase finder. I'll show this again for people who aren't going to be there to see it, weren't here to see it. Show you how to access it on SolarFire and so on. So that's what we're going to be up to next week. And then after that, we're into the meat of looking at each of the phases and the aspects within them. All right. Thanks so much for coming tonight. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
And
Thank you.
You bet. I'll see you guys next week.